and welcome to our Headliners Showcase. I'm Joe Thomas, Head of PR here at Headline Publishing Group, and I'm thrilled this evening to be introducing you to a selection of our Summer and Autumn 2023 titles, publishing across our Wildfire, Headline and Tinder Press lists. We're also going to be giving you a sneak peek at some of our upcoming 2024 titles that you need to have on your radar right now. So whatever you're into, whether it's crime, thriller, commercial fiction, book club fiction, historical fiction, non-fiction or more, we should hopefully have something to pique your interest this evening. We'd love to hear your thoughts throughout the evening on the books and the presentation, so do either get involved here in the chat or on social media. If you're posting on social, we'd love it if you could use hashtag headliners so that other people watching along can also see what you're thinking, and also do tag us at Headline PG on Twitter or Headline Books on Instagram so we can make sure we see what you're all thinking. We do also have a couple of competitions running on our social platforms at the moment. On Twitter, we want to hear about your perfect reading setup. Do you have a book nook that you like to sit in and read? Are you a bed reader? Is lying on a sun lounger with a book the idea of your perfect day? Do let us know by replying to our tweet on Twitter by midday tomorrow using the hashtag headliners, and we'll pick one winner to win a box of goodies and proofs from this evening. Instagram, you're not left out either. We've got a post up there at the moment, and if you like and comment on that post tagging one friend who you'd also love to win a box, we'll pick a random winner again after midday tomorrow for them and their friend to both win a box. Lastly, we want your help to try and finally settle some of the ongoing big book debates. Do you fold your corners down? Do you crack your spines? What is the best format to read in? We are finally hoping to sort of get an answer to some of these questions, and we'd love if you could wade in with your thoughts on Twitter, so do check the Headline PG Twitter for that. That's everything from me for now, so thank you again for joining us, and without further ado, let's introduce our first pair of authors.
Hello everyone, I'm Toby from Headline, and I'm very lucky to be joined today by two absurdly talented and best-selling authors, the wonderful Maz Evans and Karen Hamilton. Hello.
Hello.
I'm going to start with a mean request, which is to ask if you can give us a brief overview of your new books. So Maz, first of all, I'm going to pick on you. Could you tell us about Over My Dead Body?
Thank you for putting me under that bus. Appreciate it. So Over My Dead Body is my comedy crime debut, telling the story of Dr. Miriam Price, who sadly wakes up very dead one morning. All the signs point to overdose. She's quite convinced she was murdered and must convince her inquest that she was actually murdered, she didn't overdose, or she's condemned to 50 years in limbo. Sadly, she can only talk to one human being, her next door neighbour, Winnie, with whom she had a massive feud in life. And more to the point, she's extremely fed up. She was so drunk on the night of her murder, she doesn't know who did it. We've all had nights like those, planning one already.
Thank you, Maz. And Karen, if you could tell us a little bit about the contest.
Thank you. So the contest is about a trip of a lifetime, but with a sinister twist. And it's two rival teams climbing Kilimanjaro in a race to reach the top as part of their firm's annual challenge. And it's a corporate survival of the fittest, very cutthroat.
These are both brilliant books, and one thing that struck us is both of them have kind of unique hooks at their heart. And so Maz, I'm going to come to you again first. How did you come up with the idea of a protagonist who has to solve her own murder?
Well, basically, it comes from being a middle-aged woman who's been made to feel like she's dead for the past years. It's very, very rich creative territory. So I kind of want to flip the narrative, really, that A, I am still very much alive, as are all women of 40 plus. But B, we don't have to stay the same. And I think that actually midlife can be a fantastic time for really positive metamorphoses, as well as, you know, all the physical and emotional horrors that come with it. And so I wanted to explore that with a very heavy-handed metaphor to literally kill and rebirth my heroine through the travails of her own murder investigation.
Great. And Karen, what inspired you to set the contest on Mount Kilimanjaro?
When I used to work as cabin crew, we used to fly over it sometimes, and I've got these very vivid memories of looking out of the window down and seeing the clouds and the snow-peaked mountains. And I used to wonder, like, who was on the mountain at the time. It felt very magical. And then when I spoke to people who had climbed it, without fail, the two things that came up were life-changing and the hardest thing they'd ever done. And that just stuck in my head. And I just thought, what an amazing setting.
Well, it's both of you do put your characters in quite unusual situations, let's say climbing a perilous mountain and being dead. And why do you think that readers love books that put characters in such extreme kind of circumstances? Karen, I'm going to go to you first this time.
Thank you. Well, for me, it was about, so having this trip of a lifetime, you know, it would be a lifetime's dream for many people, and to climb it would just be absolutely amazing. But to have, you know, it's challenging enough, but to then have to deal with clients and to deal with, you know, all the other challenges, I thought, what a high pressure environment to be in. So obviously to have your characters in that situation trying to behave whilst going through these physical and mental challenges, I just thought it was a rich opportunity. I'm grateful.
Yeah. And Maz, how about you? Why do you think people love characters, in this case, dead?
Well, I think novels should be sort of like marriages, the correct blend of intrigue and terror. And I think both all parties are to remain interested. And I think really, and I'm sure Karen, you're the same, you basically want to put your characters in the hottest possible pressure oven and then dial the knobs to max. And because that's obviously when we see what they're made of as people. So, you know, drama is born of conflict, as indeed is marriage in my experience. And it's as well to keep the thumb screws turned up very tight the whole way along.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we finish on a deeply unfair question. I'm happy to admit that. I'm going to ask you, and I'll go with you first, Karen. Is it possible to sum up your book in just 3 words?
Cutthroat rivalry.
Oh, very nice, very quick. Maz, a backhand across the net to you.
I'm going to go funny, heartfelt, cheap.
Well, thank you very much to you both for joining us. Your book's obviously coming out later this year, and everyone will hear much more about them in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jack Butler. I'm the fiction publisher here at Wildfire, and I'm here today to introduce you to 2 of our very exciting upcoming thriller authors, Rachel Abbott and Natalie Simmons. Thanks both for joining us and taking the time. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Great to have you here. I'm going to start with just a question about, you know, could you tell us what your book is about in a few lines? Maybe, Rachel, can I start with you, possibly?
Yeah, sure. So Don't Look Away is essentially a story about how one toxic secret can tear a family apart. Nancy Holland has lost everyone she ever loved. Her mother and father are both dead. Her sister ran away, and Nancy's convinced it's her fault. So she's no idea what happened to Lola, her sister. But when she returns to Cornwall, to the village her sister disappeared from 11 years previously, she begins to realise that things might not be how they seemed at the time. Clear someone wants her gone, and she's determined to hunt down the truth.
So great. I'm absolutely so excited about this book. Natalie, same question to you. Could you tell us a little bit about Good Girls Die Last?
So Good Girls Die Last is my debut thriller. There's a heat wave in London and a serial killer's on the loose. And M has to cross the city by foot. London transport all closes down. She needs to get to the airport on time because her sister's getting married and her mother's basically dying. So she's in a rush. And it's all about the different things that she encounters on that journey. It's very kind of gripping and tense and feminist, but more than anything, it's an exploration about female suppression of rage, because everything that could go wrong does go wrong, culminating in M doing something that basically changes history.
Fantastic. Such an excellent book. And obviously, as you were both just talking about there, location is such a huge part of both of your books. How important do you think the settings were in sort of creating that mood And why? What sort of drew you, for example, Natalie, to London and that heatwave setting?
My heart's always been in London. I've lived all over the world, and I was born in London. I was there from the age of 7 to about 30. And I really miss it. I now live in the Netherlands. I was in Spain for 7 years. So London tends to kind of appear in all my books. And I was actually on Twitter during the summer of 2021, and someone said, oh, they need to make a feminist falling down, you know, that kind of early 90s movie with and because they were saying on Twitter, like, every woman's on the verge of snapping. And without even thinking, I replied, I'm writing that book right now. And then I started writing that book. And for me, the idea of that oppressive city heatwave in a city like London, but on top of that, the added tension of a serial killer, I couldn't think of another place where it would work.
It's so relatable. I mean, London in a heatwave is hell on earth.
Terrible.
So perfect setting for a thriller. And Rachel, the Stephanie King books and Don't Look Away, obviously being the most recently, they're set on the Cornish coast, and this latest book is that particularly wonderfully eerie cottage as well. What was it that drew you to that setting and the Cornish coast in general?
I decided to base my Stephanie King series in Cornwall because I love the sea so much. I live on Alderney, which is a tiny island in the English Channel, and my home is surrounded by sea, well, 3 sides anyway. And I find the sea really atmospheric and exciting because it can look really threatening or calm and peaceful. I couldn't really write stories based on Alderney because our population is less than 2,000. So it's a bit of a stretch to imagine people getting into so many dangerous situations. So I chose Cornwall. It's a stunning part of the UK and a place I love to visit. So with its towering cliffs and hidden coves, it seemed to provide the perfect backdrop to a thriller.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely the perfect one. Although I would say if there was anybody who could write an amazing thriller set on Alderney, it would be you.
That's very kind of you, but there's with 2,000 people, you can only kill so many of them.
I think write it, Rachel, honestly. Both of your books also contain these really strong female lead characters, and they have this motivation to uncover the truth, which is so compelling. Rachel, can I start with you on this one? And would you tell us a little bit more about Nancy and that search for truth, and maybe just in general a bit more about Stephanie King as well and her involvement, for those who aren't familiar with the series?
Yeah, well, I'll start with Stephanie because obviously she's the character that runs through the whole series. So Stephanie is a detective sergeant. In the first book, she starts off as a uniformed officer, but she gets upgraded to a detective partway through the book. She's quite a strong character. She's a character who doesn't suffer fools gladly. And she seems to encounter quite a few of them, mainly within the police force, it has to be said. But she has a difficult relationship, or she's had a difficult relationship with her partner, and that story runs through it as well. But each story is in its own way standalone. And in this book, the lead character is Nancy Holland. She's a young woman who's never been able to shake off the guilt of not realising how unhappy her sister was, unhappy enough to run away. Lola was just 15 when Nancy woke up one morning to find her clothes and her money gone. She couldn't believe that she'd missed the signs of her sister's unhappiness. Lola had wanted to tell her something, but she was too wound up in her own problems, and she didn't take the time to listen. She's never really forgiven herself for that. She'd do anything to get her sister back, but when she tries to find out what really happened to her sister, it puts her in serious danger.
Fantastic. And Natalie, what about Em, and what's sort of the primary motivation there, do you think, behind those decisions that she's taking in the book?
Yeah, Em's an interesting character, actually, and although she's the main character in Good Girls Die Last, her sidekick, if you like, a woman that she meets about 15-20% through the story, Rose, is very much her foil. So I really enjoyed having those contrasts. But Em is incredibly suppressed. So she's in denial about her sexuality, about her past. She's got a fractured relationship with her family, and she's self-sabotaging in all her relationships. So because of her traumatic childhood, she's grown up believing that keeping quiet is what will keep her safe and out of trouble, which is why she doesn't say anything when she's being abused at work, which is why she puts up with a really quite a horrific situation with her flatmate. but there are two very different M's in the book, because the first half she's holding it all together, and you've got that, that falling down, building up of tension, and then halfway through something happens and she lets go, and she lets go in a almighty way. So in terms of what motivates her to get her through across London, it's a family and the sense of duty, but towards the end she's got nothing left to lose and she goes all out.
It's great that you both got such like accessible and relatable motivations behind these characters. I think that's such a key of why readers keep coming back for these books. I've got one final question, which is going to be a really tricky one. Can you sum up the book in 3 words? Really tricky. Natalie, where do you start with that?
I'm going to use the words actually that people have been using in reviews and that the authors were blurbing. So I'm going to go with tense, gripping, and empowering, because it's very, in fact, I've got my Wonder Woman t-shirt on today, because it is a real kind of feminist girl.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. And Rachel, how about you?
Well, it's slightly similar, really, but I would probably go with intense rather than just tense. So intense, chilling, but ultimately, I hope, quite rewarding.
Yeah, I would definitely agree there. Well, listen, thanks to you both, Rachel and Natalie. You've been fantastic guests and joining us to tell us about these books, which we're really excited about. And we can't wait for readers to discover them themselves later on this year. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marianne, and I'm joined by Brandy Wells, author of Cleaner, and Paula Casa, author of Speak to Me, both of which are published this summer. Thank you to both of you so much for joining us to tell us about your books. Now, both of your books focus in such a brilliant way on how we live now. Can you maybe tell us a few sentences in your own words about the concept behind these books? Brandy, could I start with you? Would you mind telling us about Cleaner first?
Sure. Cleaner is about a nighttime cleaning woman in a corporate office building who only knows the daytime workers by the contents of their desk or their computers, and sets about either rewarding them, leaving them small treats, or punishing them, right? Maybe putting mayonnaise in the back of their drawer if she doesn't like them, and eventually finds various wrongdoings that the CEO is taking part in and sets about to save the company.
Wow, that sounds intriguing. Paula, over to you.
Yeah, so Speak to Me is about a woman who develops a total loathing for her husband's phone because he's always on it. He just can't keep his hands off it. And she decides she's going to deal with it once and for all. Meanwhile, she has lost a case of old love letters that went missing when they moved house. And she sort of becomes convinced that there's something more for her in that case in life, and it's a story of yearning, really, I guess, for communication, for connection, intimacy, and maybe even just a conversation.
Can you tell us, Paula, what was it that inspired you to explore this question of mobile phones and the impact they have on our lives in a novel?
Well, I think I just realised I was seeing them everywhere. I'd go out for dinner and people would be on their phones over dinner, or in the pub while talking, people on their phones, at the kitchen table, in my own living room, in parks, parents pushing buggies and things on their phones at the same time. And I do it too. And at the same time, I kind of lost a case of my old letters, or a box of old letters. And I think just everything was swirling, and I just wanted to see what happened when you pushed that idea of someone becoming so enraged with a phone that has a presence like a person.
That's intriguing. And Brandy, I love the idea of a cleaner being the focus of a novel. And, we all rely on them, but we don't necessarily see them or engage with them. What made you decide this was such a good subject for a novel?
I think a few semesters ago, I taught this class that was sort of a work as identity themed class, because I kept thinking about the ways that people introduce themselves, like, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm a history teacher or a banker or a hairstylist, right? And this idea that we were our jobs was so interesting to me. This like sort of neoliberalist branding of us as the like productivity that we bring to the table.
You, yeah.
So I kept thinking about that and sort of thinking about like what the natural endpoint of like how important our job becomes, and it begins to push everything else out of our life, right? And then once everything's pushed out of your life and you've made your job the center, it becomes the only place that you can find sort of any happiness or like any sort of meaning. So what does it mean when like we put so much stock in that one place? And the cleaner is a character that does that, right? It's become her whole life. Sort of inserted yourself into it.
Was it challenging to create that role in the book? Because, you know, the other characters don't see her. It's such a kind of like one-sided relationship. So kind of was that a challenge structurally when you were writing the story?
That's actually like the most fun part of it, right?
I love that. Okay.
The cleaner herself is a storyteller, right? She's like inventing all other characters. She's made like Mr. Buff, the fitness gym bro, or Yarn Guy, her like arts and crafts crush, right? And they become real for her, right? She creates them real, and she's at the center of everything. Yeah. And so she's not just important, but in control. And I think
you give her that power.
Yeah,
I really love that. It's such a smart idea. Paula, could you just talk to us a little bit about these letters? I was so intrigued that you said you had yourself lost a cache of letters. What is it about letters, and is it a nostalgia for a sort of slower way of life or communication that fed into the novel? What do letters mean to you?
Well, I think I don't want to feel kind of it's letters versus modern tech and that one's better than the other, but there are such rich differences, I think, in the way that we give of ourselves in different ways that we communicate. And I became very interested in the kind of physicality of letters, you know, the paper, the ink, the smell of them. It's a much richer sensory experience, I think, kind of writing and receiving a letter.
They're evocative, aren't they?
Yeah, there's something very kind of bodily about it, or you're kind of, there's more of the person in a letter somehow.
And all of that memory so powerful there, isn't it? When you get an old letter out, and
I think if you came of age in the late 80s or up to about 1997 maybe, then a lot of your formative communications would have been on letter, you know.
Yeah.
We just wrote loads.
Very true. We did. We did. Now, could each of you, would you mind, this is a tough one, could both of you sum up your books in 3 words? This is tough. Brandy, I'm going to pounce on you first. Would you mind summing up Cleaner in 3 words?
Save sad intern.
I love that. Paula, over to you.
I'd like to say warm, witty, and bookish, because it's really a kind of about a love of books and what they can do for us. And
what's not to love about that? What's not to love about that? Thank you so much, Paula and Brandy, and thanks to everyone for listening. If you've been intrigued, remember please that Cleaner and Speak to Me both published this summer. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hello there. Well, my name is Tommy Jessup. Yes, you might recognise me as a really good looking actor and a campaigner, and now I'm writing my very own memoir. Yes, it is called A Life Worth Living. I will take you in from line of duty to the Houses of Parliament and my personal life. Yes, I am a man on a mission to show you what people with Down syndrome really are capable of. Thanks, headline, for giving me the chance to tell my story. You truly are wicked. Oh man.
Hi to all of you at Hachette. I'm Ros Atkins from BBC News, and I'm really excited to be working with Wildfire and Headline on my first book, which is out in September. The Art of Explanation is a guide to working out what you want to say and then saying it in the most effective way possible. And over the last 30 years, I've developed a system to help me, I hope, communicate with clarity and with impact. I use this system every day at work, explaining the news. I use it in many other parts of my life too. And the Art of Explanation is full of practical advice to help you explain yourself in a whole range of situations, whether you're writing an essay, doing a presentation, interviewing for a job, having a meeting with your boss, seeing a doctor, pitching an idea. To be honest, the list goes on. And the prize here is a big one, because if we can all communicate with clarity and confidence, of course, it doesn't guarantee that we get the outcome or response we're hoping for, but it gives us the best chance. And if you do that in all of your interactions, if you can remove all the obstacles to people really understanding what you want to say, the impact can be transformative. And I'm hugely excited to have had the chance to put every technique I use to do this all in one place. Now, if I was to pick 3 things that I hope readers will take from the Art of Explanation, well, the first is to simply notice all the different moments in our lives when we can take the chance to explain ourselves better. The second, well, I think that would be that readers feel confident to use the simple systems in the book to work out what they want to say and also how best to do that effectively. And third, well, that would be the readers feeling that communicating with confidence and clarity is within reach, whatever the subject and whatever the situation.
Hello there, my name is Charisse Hobbs. I'm here with Harriet Evans and Freya Berry, and I'm going to ask them a few questions about their exciting new novels coming soon. The Stargazers from Harry and the Birdcage Library from Freya. So starting with you, Harry, could I just ask you to briefly introduce your wonderful new novel?
The Stargazers opens in 1969, and you have a young couple making their way in a hired van over the cobbles of a beautiful, rather bohemian red brick street of houses in Hampstead, before Hampstead was super posh and more kind of bohemian and 60s and lovely. And they're a young married couple, and they've just bought their first home together, Sarah and Daniel. And we follow them over the next couple of years as they try to set up home. She's a cellist and he's a writer and comedy writer and wants to be a historian. And he's very chaotic and she's very organized. And as they have a baby and they try to make their house a bit better, and we start to see that everything really isn't okay with Sarah. She can't really cope with a family life, and becoming a mother is incredibly hard for her. And at the end of the first part, we see her go back to this house, which keeps being referenced, and you start to see that her childhood was really quite extraordinary. And she grew up in a crumbling stately home in the 1950s, and had a really extraordinary and awful childhood. And that's what the book is about. It's about her reconciling what happened to her when she was little. And the 50s was a time when there were hundreds and hundreds of stately homes just being demolished or collapsing. There was something like 3 a week at one point, just as a result of the Second World War and the changes in society. And that's a good thing in some ways, because the class system needed changing, but it's also meant loads of things got lost and destroyed. And I've always really loved that idea of crumbling houses and what gets lost and the chaos of family life and how some people can't be in families. So it's about whether Sarah will be able to overcome this and what happens to her and her family and what happened to her and her family.
Thank you. And Freya? Could you describe your novel in just a few sentences?
Birdcage Library is my second novel, out June. It's a gothic mystery and a love story. An adventuress, Emily Blackwood, receives a mysterious employment offer from the owner of a Scottish castle. And at the castle, she discovers this old book, and it's called the Birdcage Library. And it contains a mystery to unravel. It has clues as to the fate of Hester Vogel, who vanished 50 years before. And Hester was married to an exotic animal dealer in Gilded Age, New York. So it's a dual timeline novel set between the castle and Manhattan in that era. So yeah, if you like secrets, obsession and puzzles and a bit of taxidermy, then this is for you.
So you touched there on the setting. So that's the second question I wanted to ask you about. So we go from an ancient castle in the 30s, perched on a loch in remote Scotland, back to Gilded Age Manhattan. So why did you choose these settings and how did you go about researching them?
Yeah, so I love it when the setting almost becomes the character, and kind of nothing to me is more characterful than a Scottish castle. I mean, I got married at one, so the castle in the Birdcage Library is called Castle Paris, which means paradise in Scottish Gaelic, and that name, of course, comes to be quite ironic as the plot unfolds. And I guess I'm interested in the fact that castles are a defense, but that defensiveness can also work against you. You can become trapped inside them. So I visited lots of Scottish castles for research. One where, got sieged and everyone was trapped and then sort of burned to death inside. I visited Eileen Dunnan, which is sort of most famous castle in Scotland, and that has a causeway, which Paris also has, and that causeway floods at high tide. And I also talked to an actual real life castle laird who told me that sometimes the winds are so strong that he can't open his own front door. And of course, Scots always have amazing tales associated with their castles, the ghost of Glamis Castle, for example. So I researched all that and made it my own. And then you have Hester's timeline, which is in this Gilded Age, late 1800s. And that's kind of the era of the Astors and the Vandals taking over New York, and it's the heyday of circuses. Hester's husband runs an exotic animal emporium, and this is the time of the Greatest Showman, P.T. Barnum, and you can literally buy a hippo in Manhattan if you want to. And the animal emporium is based on a real life one, whose owners recommended keeping canaries in tiny cages so that they sing more sweetly. So there's this kind of current of spectacle and of show, but there's also the darker side of that. And Hester Vogel's brownstone very much plays into that. They have these new furnishings and shiny objects from their newly acquired fortune. But this is all kind of hiding her collapsing marriage. And of course, the metaphor of the cage and the situation of womanhood in that era plays into all that.
Sounds fascinating. And Harry, you touched on yours earlier. We have this beautiful old house in Hampstead, the Row, which is falling into disrepair, contrasting with Fane Hall, once called the finest house in Sussex. Why did you choose those settings and how did you go about researching them?
Well, I started writing a book about a couple moving into a house, and I wanted to write about the street and them raising their family. And I just got more and more interested in where she'd come from. I don't like it when people talk about their characters as if they're real people, but she did seem completely real in this inability to get past something that had happened to her. And I kept seeing this house, and we went on holiday to this place in Wales where there was beautiful like flight of very, very wide stairs near our youth hostel, which is the only place available after lockdown. And I walked up this flight of stairs, incredible, like carved marble. There's these lily ponds, there's like herons. It was incredible. And they're all fluted, and it's just extraordinary. You get to the top of the stairs and there's nothing. And there had been this house there that was huge, absolutely vast, and they had I can't remember what it's called, but a glass plate that you look through like a mezzanine, and you can see where the house would sit on that land. And it was the weirdest experience. It was one of the strangest experiences of my life. And I was like, this is what I want to write about. And the house in the book isn't like that, actually. The core of it still remains, but just that idea that all these things can vanish, and listening to Freya talk, just that idea of how it's far too much for them by the end, the amount of upkeep, but also the way when you're that rich and posh, you had to cling to that stuff. It felt so important. And in the meantime, in the 50s, all these, normal, really good housing estates were springing up. I live in a 30s house, and I've lived in a Georgian house. 30s houses are much better to live in. They're just, they're properly built, they're well insulated, and what home means. So I just found that really fascinating. And I love doing all of that. I love like sticking pictures up on the wall. I walk around Hampstead loads, and and the house in the Hampstead section is the house. I based it on the house in the Railway Children, where they live at first. It's based on this kind of specific little road before they move out to Yorkshire. So I wandered around that loads. And I think if you've done enough research and you can create it in your head, and it doesn't matter if no one else gets it, if you can just believe it, then you'll be able to put a bit of that down on the page.
It's really interesting, and it leads on to the theme that both of you write about actually in your books, of buried secrets, and the fact that these houses have witnessed so much over the years, and the walls sort of bear witness to tragedy and things that have happened, and also thinking about that sort of lingering impact that historic events have on us, and how things echo down through the generations. And I can see that in both of your books. So maybe Harry, starting with you, why did you choose to explore those kinds of themes?
I always do, even when I was writing my earlier books, which were sort of pegged as more chick lit because they came out at a time when there was lots of chick lit around, and I wasn't married. I'm not married now, actually, but before I had children, I've still always liked writing about houses and families. I've always found it weird where you read a book and you just know something about the heroine and her life at that point. You don't know anything about where she's come from, what happened to her in the past, what's going to happen to her in the future. And I can't believe I'm about to say this, but there's a really good quote at the beginning of Prince Harry's memoir, which is a Faulkner quote, which is, "The past isn't past, it isn't even present." That idea that like you look at families as stuff that's happened in the past, and then you look around you at people who have incredibly difficult lives, either because they're not speaking to their families or because something that happened to them in childhood or whatever. This idea that it's the past, it's not buried secrets. Secrets aren't, but everything that you're made of is what happened to you when you were younger. And the older I get, and my children are 6 and 11, you realize when you're experiencing a childhood in front of you, and you've experienced your own childhood, it's part of you going forward every single day, And I think the lockdown was really interesting for highlighting that. It made you stop, willingly or not, and really think about all of that stuff. And we're seeing that quite a lot, the results of that quite a lot now, I think.
And Freya, your novel is rich with family secrets too. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, it's like Harry says, if houses could talk, what would they say? And the kind of germ of the Birdcage Library was partly planted when I came across the desk of my namesake, Freya Stark, who was this explorer before and after the Second World War, and she was an intelligence official as well. And her desk was sort of round like a map of the globe. And I just thought, what a great, how many secrets this desk must have been party to. And as for that, I just love secrets, that, this kind of absence of something, this kind of the negative space that they create, the ripples that reverberate on from that. As Harry's saying, the past is happening now, like its effects are always reverberating around us. And and explored that with my first book, The Dictator's Wife, and now with this one, you know, Emily Blackwood, my adventuress, she finds herself in this treasure hunt laid 50 years ago, which will help her solve the mystery of what happened to Hester. And she kind of thinks that she's reaching into the past, but without giving too much away, the past reaches out and sort of grabs her right back. So I just love, exploring that, intersections of time and the unexpected things that can happen when different things collide.
Brilliant, thank you. All right, now this is the challenging question to you, but I'll ask it. I'll ask each of you, can you describe your book in just 3 words to give viewers a taste of what to expect? So I'll start with you, Freya. 3 words.
So cruel. Okay, Gothic murder mystery.
Neatly done. Harry.
Chaos, childhood, anger.
Lovely. I thought you were going to say and stars.
Oh, and stars. Sorry,
stars.
yeah, stars.
4. There we go. And on that note, thank you so much. It's always lovely to talk to you both. So, and we can't wait to publication of your books coming soon. Thanks. Bye.
Hello, I'm Toby, an editor here at Headline, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by not one, but 2 multi-award winning and best-selling authors, Steve Kavanagh and S.A. Cosby. Very pleased to have you both here together. And to start with, and this is always a very difficult question, could you both give us a quick snapshot of your new books in just a few sentences? And to be mean, I'm going to you first, Steve.
Oh, thank you. That gives some extra thinking time.
He has got the advantage there, I'm afraid.
Okay. My new book is called Kill for Me, Kill for You, and it's my sort of love letter to Alfred Hitchcock. It's about 2 women in New York who are very lost and alone, and their lives have been destroyed by men. And they meet by chance one dark evening, and over drinks, they realize they have a lot of stuff in common. And they realize that they're no longer alone. They're now together, and they form a deadly pact. If you kill for me, I'll kill for you.
That is an intriguing little glimpse into it. Thank you, Steve. And Sean, to you.
Wow, Steve's made mine sound really weak, but I'll do my best. So All the Sinners Bleed is the story of Titus Crown, the first Black sheriff in a small southern town, who discovers after a tragic school shooting that the 2 victims of the shooting and a third mystery person were a trio of serial killers. And so he just determines to find this mystery, this mystery person, while also dealing with racial and social strife in his small town.
There we go, another good one. Sean, I'm coming to you now. You're based in Virginia and have set All the Sinners Bleed in a rural community there. Why do you think that small town settings have such enduring appeal for both writers and readers?
I think it's very relatable. I think even if you live in a large city like London or New York or Chicago, you have family or friends, or you're aware of the small town dynamics. And I think the idea of how close everyone in a small town is appealing to folks. Coming from a small town, one of the greatest things about it is everybody knows you. But also, one of the worst things about it is everybody knows you. So I think that's why it appeals to folks.
And Steve, you're based in Northern Ireland, but Kill for Me, Kill for You, and your Eddie Flynn books are based in America. What made you choose to set them in the USA?
It's just the perfect place, I think, for thrillers and crime. You can have everything. You can have that rural noir, which Sean does so brilliantly, or you can go to big mega cities. The curious thing is you can kind of get some of those worlds no matter where you are. So, for example, this book's set in Manhattan. You know, it's one of the most populated places on earth. And yet one of the things the book explores is there are people there who can be utterly alone. And there can be companionship in the loneliness of others, no matter how many millions of people you're surrounded by.
And that does come through in the book really clearly. Sean, on to you now. So all your books, including All the Sinners Bleed, are standalones. Is it intimidating having to start each book with a blank slate?
Oh yeah, it's terrible. It's awful. But but at the same time, I feel a load of freedom. Someone who writes a series, and Steve can attest to this, can be wonderful. I love series. I love the Eddie Flynn. I love the Kinsey and Gennaro series, and multiple other ones, because those series become like old friends. It's very comfortable to know these people and know their lives and catch up and check up with them. But at the same time, it can be a little constraining. And so doing standalones, it allows me to sort of broaden and stretch my horizons. That being said, I'm getting a lot of feedback that people want to see Titus Crown again. So we'll see how that goes.
Watch this space. And Steve, you've done obviously standalones, and many of your novels are focused on the inimitable Eddie Flynn. But Kill for You's got an entirely new cast of characters. What was it that inspired you to write a standalone this time?
I don't know. I think it's the idea for me that wins through, and what's the best idea? And this was one which was burning a hole in my pocket, and I decided that I just have to get this book down to see if I can write it. And I think stepping away from the series every now and again really helps me. I always learn something new when I go outside of the series, and I can bring that back in to the Eddie Flynn series. So the idea dictates it for me.
Fantastic. And as a final question, gentlemen, and a particularly sadistic one as well. I'm going to go to you first, Sean. Could you sum up your book in just 3 words? It felt mean as I was saying it.
I guess if you wanted to sum up All the Sinners Bleed in 3 words, it would be the season. No, we find the truth.
There we go. We can contract them into 3. Absolutely. And awesome. And for you, Steve.
Twisty.
We'll take that. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and all readers can look forward to your books coming soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Ashley Elston, and I'm the author of First Lie Wins, publishing in January 2024. Evie has everything a nice Southern girl could want. A perfect doting boyfriend, house with a white picket fence, fancy group of friends. Only thing is, Evie Porter doesn't exist. Evie Porter is a job. First Lie Wins follows a woman who has worked for her mysterious employer under various aliases for the last 10 years. But when past mistakes begin to catch up with her, she realizes there's more on the line than she originally thought. Evie's current job is set in my home state of Louisiana, and the reader gets glimpses of her past jobs that take place throughout the South. I hope this thriller will keep you turning the pages as you follow along with Evie, as she uses her wits to stay one step ahead of her past while still making sure there's a future in front of her. Happy reading!
I'm Sarah Marsh. I'm the author of A Sign of Her Own, which is publishing February 2024. This is my first book. It's a historical novel about a young deaf woman and the invention of the telephone. The narrator is Ellen Lark, and she has a dilemma. Her former teacher, Alexander Graham Bell, is being challenged over the right to the telephone patent, and he asks for her help. But she has her own story to tell about the deaf community and how he had betrayed her, and so she must decide whether to take a stand against him. I wrote the book because I grew up relying on hearing aids and lip reading to communicate, as did other members of my family, so I started to think about this history of people trying to fix and correct deafness, which brought me to the story of the telephone's inventor, and I wanted to tell it from the perspective of a deaf protagonist. I'm really looking forward to sharing it with readers.
Hi, I'm Liz Riddell. and I'm the author of Claremont, a novel about Claire Claremont, who was the stepsister of Mary Shelley and a lover of Byron, and also the mother of Byron's child. Claire's probably best known for being a member of the party at the Villa Diodati in the summer of 1816, when Byron famously asked everybody to write a ghost story himself, Shelley, Mary and John Polidori. It's a night, of course, that inspired Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But Claire was keeping a secret that night. She was carrying Byron's child. And I've always been fascinated by what happened to her afterwards. What happened to Allegra? Why did Claire end up in Russia for many years, sometime later? Did she in fact have a mysterious lover when she was in Paris, when she was in her 40s? Did she have Shelley's child? And why did she and Mary row so badly just 2 years before Mary's death? They never spoke again. Claire lived a long life full of adventure and mystery and tragedy, but she's rarely put at the centre of it. And that's really what I wanted Claremont to do.
And with that, our whistle-stop tour of upcoming books has come to an end. I hope there's been plenty in there to pique your interest, and we're really excited to share even more on these titles and others over the coming months. Many of these books are now up on our NetGalley page, so if you read digitally, that's your best bet to try and get a hold of some copies. Our competitions will also still be running till midday tomorrow, so do enter on Twitter and Instagram to be in with a chance of winning a box of proofs and goodies. Other than that, all that remains is for me to thank our brilliant editors and authors for joining us to talk about their books this evening, and to all of you for coming along and interacting and sharing on social. It's always hugely appreciated, and I hope you've enjoyed the evening. As ever, do watch this space for much more to come from the team here at Headline, and otherwise, thank you again for joining, and have a good night.